How to select Aboriginal books for appropriate content. My inquiry Prodi assignment for Queen's University. Hi, my name is Lise Graham, and I'm a special ed teacher on maternity leave with an education background in social studies, Aboriginal education, mental health in children and adolescents, and early literacy. I'm addicted to learning, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm going to start off with a territory acknowledgement. I am presenting to you from beautiful Pender Island, also known as Sadeas, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the unceded territory of the Sincholas and Hokameen speaking people. It's a privilege to live and learn here. Why is book selection so important? Canada's history is filled with events and circumstances that attempted to destroy First Nation, Métis, and Inuit culture. Given this fraught history, not all books that focus on Indigenous themes and people are honest and sensitive. They may share false information and is harmful to Indigenous people. Debbie Reese, who is an Indigenous author out of the US, argues that representation in children's literature can be quite negative, as the portrayal of Aboriginal people often is primitive, savage-like, as seen in Little House on the Prairie, or Aboriginal people are represented as romantic, tragic heroes who live in harmony with the earth, and they offer poetic proses. In the BC curriculum, there's a significant emphasis on exploring and embedding Aboriginal ways of knowing and culture in lessons. First Peoples knowledge is not limited to social studies lessons, but should be utilized in language arts, science, math, and fine arts. When you're selecting your criteria for selecting children's books, I'm going to be showing the framework that Debbie Reese uses. So you kind of have two ways that you can do it. You can either go from a list that's already vetted all the books, or you can also use your Debbie Reese's criteria to decide if you want to use this source or not. The criteria that I'm going to use can also be used for older students as well. So one of the things that Debbie Reese says is that you should choose books that are tribally specific. There's more than 600 Aboriginal bands in Canada. The bands are very diverse from one another, and it's important to recognize the Pacific band that is represented in the book, as cultural practice and lifestyles greatly differ. Stories that you hear on the West Coast are going to be significantly different the further across the province you go, across Canada. So it's really important to know what you're reading about. Also, to choose books by Aboriginal writers. Despite best intentions, cultural details can be inaccurate when an author is writing about a culture that they don't belong to. It's important to give voice to Indigenous writers to share their voice and stories. When introducing a story to students, highlight who the author is and where they're from. And finally, use Indigenous books year-round. There's a growing number of Aboriginal literature available to teachers and students, and that can be used at any time during the year. There's numerous texts available for Orange Shirt Day in September, but so many stories about friendship, self-discovery, growing up, music, stewardship, and world creation can be utilized and read in any month. I have a couple examples that I'm going to share with you that meet the criteria that Debbie Reese has put out. One is Sometimes I Feel Like a Fox by Danielle Daniels. So this story introduces children to the idea of totem animals, a deeply rooted Anishinaabe tradition. Danielle is both the author and illustrator of this book and is a member of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. A book for more senior students is Monkey Beach by Eden Robinson. This book is written by a Hassla and Hulsuch writer and is about a young Hassla woman remembering her volatile childhood as she searches for her lost brother on the West Coast. This book is suitable for a secondary English class, and it does have some more mature themes. If you are looking for more of a list, BC curriculum has a link to this, which is the BC Indigenous Resource Inventory. So other organizations have put together books that complement the BC curriculum, and they can be found here. And it gives you the title and where to find it. Another place to go is actually Queen's University. So they can give you some guidance of how to determine if a book is accurate, if it's a good book to use. And they also have some lists as well that you can find some books. Additionally, if you're wanting to not just find the book but match it as well, Alberta has put out some really great resources. So this is the First Nations resource across the curriculum. And this resource provides some great resources for art, health, social studies, language arts, and science, among other subjects at all grade levels. So right here, you're seeing the science. Obviously, this is just a small bit of looking at the criteria. There's much more comprehensive criteria out there. The Library and Archives of Canada has published an extensive tool for assessing and validating resources. With older students, that tool could be used for teaching cultural bias and critical thinking in research. It's very detailed, and I mean, if you're wanting to do your best effort, I would go take a look at that one. But it's okay to also just start with RIS's criteria as a starting point. Ultimately, as educators, we want Indigenous children who are not always visible to not be harmed when Indigenous culture and history is misrepresented or absent. Thank you for listening to me speak, and I will provide some links for further research.